Welcome to Built Together, the podcast where design, technology, and leadership meet to shape the spaces where we work, learn, and connect in. In every episode, you'll hear from architects, engineers, technologists, and innovators who are breaking down the silos and rethinking how we create spaces that truly bring people together. Because great spaces aren't just about the plans or the tech, they're about the people. And it's what's possible when we build together. Thank you and welcome to Build Together. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Built Together. This is a show where we explore how technology, space, and human experience come together to shape how we work and how things actually happen in the workplace. Today's conversation is one that I've been looking forward to because this guest doesn't just talk about the future of workplace, he truly cares about it. Today, I want to introduce you to Jason Antinori. Jason leads the intelligent building and AV strategy at TELUS. And what makes his perspective really unique is that he is thinking at a scale of entire buildings and portfolios while still obsessing over every single employee and how they feel in the workplace and how they feel when they walk into a space. So this conversation really isn't about just the gear. This is about experience, intention, and designing places where people actually want to be. Jason, thank you for being here. I'm really glad that we're doing this. So this is going to be a good one, man. This is going to be a fun one, man. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I've really been looking forward to it. So this is great. I appreciate the invite.
Oh yeah, of course, of course. I mean, you and I had a great conversation not too long ago. You had a fantastic panel discussion at Avixa when the 2030 conversation, where you were joined by the CEOs of some of the organizations that you interact with, on a daily basis. Sure, diversified and organizations like that. And I thought that it was really cool. So this conversation is really one that I think is very important for the industry at large, not just the AV or technology industry, but for the individuals in the space. I think it's important for folks to hear about what it is that you do and what it means to your organization, and ultimately what that means to the industry at large. And so, before we talk about like systems or buildings, I want to start with something about you. So, what made you get into the AV space or the technology space? So, why did you care about this work? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah. So I mean, my journey, I think is been a fun one. Let's say. I mean, I started way back in high school as a DJ, like a local DJ. I grew up in a small town here in Ontario, Canada, and we didn't have a lot of like access to the kind of technology and the stuff that me and my friends were into. And so we started like messing around, like DJing semi-professionally, let's call it, for events or what have you. But then we also got into like turntables and music production and that whole sort of thing that was coming of age in the 90s, but from a digital recording and production perspective. And from there, I really just, it opened my eyes to the idea of audio engineering and what possible careers could sort of come out of this hobby that I had taken on and was a part of. Music had been a part of my life for a long time. I played piano as a kid. And so, again, coming from this small town, I moved to the big city of Toronto and ended up going to school for audio engineering and had big dreams of working in the studio and being this producer and all of this. And this was all at a time, and I'm kind of dating myself here, but I'm all at a time when Napster and digital music and MP3 were rampantly bootlegged and downloaded illegally, and everyone thought the
Yeah.
music industry was going to collapse under the weight of this new technology, and no one knew what to do. And so I'm heading into the music business right at this point. And then, funny enough, once I got there and I got into some of my courses and I really got into some of like the acoustics and studio design and sound reinforcement, some of these more technical, more sort of more of that balance between technical and art at that point. And so I got into the courses and really got into studio design and wanted to now be a studio designer. So now I'm going from wanting to be in the music business and this in this place that was already considered a house of cards that was about to fall down, and I wanted to now build studios which everyone thought were just going to be sort of obsolete. I use the analogy often that, I mean, I went from wanting to be an NHL hockey player to now wanting to be an NHL referee, which is an even smaller pool of candidates that get the chance to do that profession. And so So I never lost like vision of my goal, and it stayed with me. But I sort of, as most people do, journeyed around. I left school and was able to actually get my first job out of school as an IMAX projectionist of all things. So, for those that are familiar with commercial cinema, IMAX is the big, large, like 70 millimeter, 15 per frame Canadian designed and Canadian invention that I was able I mean, be a projectionist, run a cinema, and from there, I was actually able to grow a decades long career in commercial cinema here in Canada with the largest cinema exhibition companies. And I did ultimately get into designing theaters and designing systems like large digital signage and like pre-show type systems. We were one of the first to build and deploy digital video based pre-show signage before the movies played. I did the big rollout of all of our digital cinema theaters as well as all of our digital 3D theaters when those all came out. And I sort of hit a bit of a wall, or I hit just, I mean, sort of a ceiling, I guess, with regards to that, because the industry is only so big here in Canada,
Sure.
and as that was coming up, I mean, as you sort of come up to a door and you get a chance to open it, I did, and I got my eyes open to Avixa, which at the time was also known as Infocom, and the CTS training, and I went through and saw that there's this I can actually do like AV design. I mean, not necessarily for recording studios, but there is this whole other industry that's there and vibrant and growing and is that blend of art and science and all of this and so I got my CTS and from that really opened a door to me becoming an AV designer and I moved over to the current company with TELUS and I spent the first decade of my career here at TELUS, just a little over even, doing AV design and for large enterprise, government, higher education, all throughout Canada, and a little bit into the states as well. As I got more involved, I networked more internally at TELUS. I was able to meet and work with some of our internal real estate folks, and those introductions, those engagements with those folks, really led me to where I am now and running our Intelligent Building Center of Excellence and our Smart Spaces program and evolving the systems design, systems solutioning concepts that I had built and honed in the AV world and was able to really parlay that into where I am now looking at entire buildings and entire building systems holistically rather than just sort of segmented into the buckets that you kind of traditionally would have in a building from either an operations or a renovation or a new construction.
Yeah, and so with that, I mean, Uh, so I myself, I was a DJ for my daughter's 6th birthday. My career didn't last long. I was unfortunately I was forced out. Let's just say that. But you know, with those transitions, going from theater to more corporate style design, and when we look at TELUS, right, it's not just I think it's really important to kind of speak to also what TELUS is as an organization, because you're not just designing for a singular space. You're designing for an entire portfolio. And so with that transition, like I have this idea that one goes into that with a little bit of imposter syndrome for sake of the size and scale of everything. But was there a point in your career where it kind of shifted, like in your role, especially at TELUS, where it shifted from like interesting work to like this is important work, right? This is really important. One, it's important to get it right, but two, it's also important to understand those different experiences within the different buildings or the different spaces within your portfolio. So, can you tell us a little bit about like, or tell the folks a little bit about like what TELUS is and what those spaces like kind of actually look like, right? Because it differs, right, for you all, I'm sure. But if you can kind of give some context around that, that'd be awesome. Just so that people can understand a little bit more about like just how special your role actually is within this organization.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, TELUS is traditionally and I mean, it's foundationally a one of the what we call it here in Canada, one of the big three telcos. So, we are along with two others. I won't necessarily mention here, but we are a
Yeah.
Western based telecommunications company primarily serving consumer and business customers with cell phone connectivity, internet connectivity, home television. That's really a lot of the cornerstone and a lot of like the bread and butter of where TELUS generates revenue. But in addition to that, we're a little more unique than other traditional telcos. We have a very vibrant startup and entrepreneurial mentality. So that's led us to develop a very robust healthcare division. We have a smart agriculture division. We have one of the largest venture funds in Canada. And then more recently and more directly related to what I do, we're in the midst of building our first rental developments as part of a portfolio called TELUS Living. The first two buildings will be going live next year, and they are a purpose-built rental. And it's a little unique. We were able to leverage some of the real estate assets that we had through our decopperization, which since about 2020, we've been aggressively migrating our networks to fiber, G wireless. And so in doing that, we've removed all of that copper, physical copper out of the ground, out of our networks. And in doing so, we've freed up a lot of our real estate, like literal real estate footprints in residential communities where central offices would be or would traditionally be located. We've been able to shrink those down to a fraction of their size, and it's left this land and this opportunity to do something with. And I mean, a more traditional company may look at it and say, well, let's just sell it. We'll realize that one time revenue and move on. But again, TELUS likes to be a little out of the box, and it's one reason why I've been here since 2008 and really enjoy my time here is that our approach was, why don't we build, or why don't we develop something? Why don't we help? We have, much like other areas of North America, I mean, housing is a crunch here, and it's required and needed. And so we saw this opportunity, and it wasn't our first time. And we've developed our own commercial buildings and mixed use buildings before, but this is the first purpose built sole rental building that we will build and own and manage and operate. And more importantly, leverage our technology, leverage our deployment. So that's a big part of what my current role is a part of, is actually framing out and designing and implementing the smart building, both in suite and base building, for all of those TELUS Living rental units. We're in the midst of deploying the first version of our resident app, for example, and property manager apps. So that's become a big part of my current role. In addition to that, though, I take care now internationally of our smart space strategy, and really what that includes is how our admin spaces are optimized for really data collection, data analysis, and all focused on our team member well-being, team member in-office work experience, and delivering something exceptional for our team members of across like all aspects of team members, both able-bodied and those that require assistance in some way or another. It's another big part of heading into next year that we're actually working on, is really optimizing spaces for those that with abilities, challenges, be it neurodiverse or physical, and really trying to make our spaces as inclusive and as welcoming to the broadest amount of our team members that we possibly can.
Yeah, so, and you mentioned the neurodiversity piece, and that's something that I'm going to touch on a little bit later and come back to, because that's been a really big focus of mine as of late. And I can say that I've been influenced by obviously getting to speak to some really interesting people, getting to read some really interesting books, but really understanding what that means to the spaces that we live in and we work in. And one thing that is, what I think stands true for all of that, and I think it's where you all as TELUS are really uniquely positioned. The data stream of like what the experience is like, not just in the office, but the commute and then the experience at home, right? That I wouldn't want to say third space, because home offices are a big thing. You have people that are working from home. And then being on the real estate side of that, in developing as a real estate developer, a single family or multifamily, residential property, let's just say, you have a unique ability to really kind of capture data in a way that most other organizations, they may not have that ability to do so. When you mentioned something in your Avixa, I believe it was your Avixa conversation, where you said that people will sit in the car for an hour to get to a concert, right? But is the office kind of worth that commute? And when you're there, when you're there and you're excited to get to a concert, you almost never think about what's happening kind of around you or the time, right? Most of the time you're listening to music, you're in your zone, you're just ready to get to the concert. But I think that that speaks to a bit of a bigger truth with how people kind of relate to work now. And so with TELUS, when you all are designing your spaces, right, whether it be your residential spaces or your corporate environments, what does that idea look like and how you all design your workspace environments?
So we took on back around 2018 or so, we started what we called the real estate evolution program, and we really took a step back and wanted to look at how our spaces were used in a more like in a more constructive way. And so
Sure,
we had met with some consultants. We put working groups together and focus groups, and built out personas of who would be in our spaces and what their intent would be in those spaces. And from there, we sort of built out a framework for what a redeveloped or a brand new building, and this is all on the admin side, like for our team members now. I mean, like what the floors would look like and how they would be built out. And we ultimately ended up with what we called like a collaboration floor and a like a co-working type of floor, basically. So in and one is more focused on meeting spaces and both structured and scheduled and ad hoc and informal, and the other was more built for heads down work and just sort of being there because we do have a broad and diverse set of skills, let's call them, within our
sure,
team, and
yeah,
when they're coming in to do work. And so if a sales team was going to come in and they needed desks and we needed to sort of densify the space. I mean, then that's where like a floor built for that was more conducive. But then, and more importantly, when teams are coming in and they want to meet and they want to collaborate as a team, I mean, they can also do that and be free to be creative and loud and do whatever they needed to do in order to facilitate that creative flow or their work, whatever that might be. So we went through this whole process. We got to these personas, we got to these use cases, we got to these sort of floor designs, we got to places with regards to the technology we wanted to deploy to be able to now collect and understand how the spaces were used. So
sure.
things like intelligent occupancy sensing, some limited environmental sensing at the time. We've sort of evolved that as we've gone along, but and as well, we decided to also update our reservation system and room booking and desk booking system at the same time. Then some crazy pandemic hit and 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 kind of threw everything for a bit of a spin. But for us, we were already quite a mobile company. Like I had been a remote worker since like 2010 at the time. So being at home didn't rock our boat as much as it did for others that I know. But at the same time, it did give us an opportunity to evaluate again just before we fully went all in with this new sort of real estate evolution program. And ultimately, minus a few small tweaks that were made, we jumped in full steam now that our offices were absolutely empty. We were all still essential workers here
Right,
in
right.
Canada, the most of us. So we were able to go in and we got to work and we actually started renovating and updating the floors. We were also building a building in Calgary at the same time. And the framework of that new building was then sort of is what fed into the redevelopment of these other floors, starting here in Toronto, and then we did some in Montreal as well, and we sort of went across the country. So, and that's what led us to be able to deploy and really the first instances of being able to collect some data, collect utilization, and it was all there and ready. And one day we were hoping everyone's going to be in and be able to sort of see the fruits of this labor, and ultimately
Sure.
it, and eventually it did happen. So so it's been great to be able to have done it. It was again kind of ambitious at the time. It wasn't inexpensive to deploy, especially in the context of having nobody in an office. There was definitely conversations of are people ever going to come back? I mean, in the depths of everything, as you probably experienced as well. I mean, it was lots of questions on if anyone would ever be back in an office. But here we are now, sort of almost 6 years out, and we found a balance with our return to work, a return to
Yeah.
office. experiences. But and it's been meaningful to have access to the data that we've been collecting, and now we're trying to hit our next level and our next gear with regards to what we do with that data.
Yeah, so to me, it sounds like a lot of organizations, especially in AV technology. Well, I guess I can't put a blanket statement on this, but from where I sit and what I've envisioned, or not, sorry, not envisioned, but from what I've seen, there are still organizations out there that look at, or still frame conversations around work from home versus like working in the office. I feel like from where you sit, it feels more like there's like a continuum, right? There's different places, different modes, but the same kind of goals within that space. And so, it, what signals are you kind of seeing that are telling you that, or well, like, are there any signals or behavior that you're seeing that tell you that this isn't just as simple as a return to office story when we're looking at how these spaces are being designed? Smart spaces in particular, with the data that you're trying to collect and the fact that you need bodies to collect that data, or you need people interacting with technology to collect that data. Is there a place where like you feel like, one, it's not a simple return to office story, but two, where leaders may be misunderstanding what people actually want from these workspaces?
Yeah, I think that's been a big part of the struggle is really understanding what the workplace, like the office workplace, should and shouldn't be for workers when they are coming in. And it's inevitable that some people, yeah, they do need to come in and do need to do heads down work. Be it like I know for some financial institutions, I mean, there's obligations like legislatively, let's call it, or regulatory obligations to have people, and that more importantly, the data not outside of the confines of
Right.
the network or what have you. But I mean, beyond that, I mean, I think as people have worked through the disruption of the pandemic and being at home, and then really worked through the disruption of what does return to office look like, and I think having to have a bit of tough love, let's call it, with your employees to have a mandate coming back. Like TELUS, we never had, I mean, a formal or sort of rigid mandate company-wide, but certain teams did. I mean, were mandated to come back for one reason or another, and there was conversations had, and people understood what those situations were. But and I know it for those, even some of those teams, it wasn't necessarily easy, but
Sure.
I think employers are understanding what, outside of those mandated need to be in the office folks, the understanding of what a workplace should and shouldn't be, or could and couldn't be for an individual to have them want to come in, have them leadership want to bring their teams in, really, I think can help to better understand how the spaces can be used. And I mean, you mentioned having people come in to have data. I've come to learn that not having data is also a data point. If and we've leveraged and used that. I mean, it's allowed us to right size our real estate portfolio in the last
Yeah.
few years as well, and find a balance from a utilization and density perspective within our spaces. But yeah, I think understanding that collaboration, understanding that those, I mean, I know it's kind of overused, but like the collisions that can happen in the office, like they are legitimate, they are meaningful. It's,
Yeah.
I mean, just a week ago when we were in the office, I mean, I had a conversation with part of my team that I never met in person, and we were able to share just this little sort of insight about shipping that they had no idea about. We would never have had that conversation over. We couldn't schedule a 30-second conversation to say, "Oh, hey, you can ask the mailroom for a label and they'll email it to you so you don't have to go to the FedEx or whatever." And they had no idea, but something as simple as that, I mean, it's a productivity piece. I mean, that's a small little productivity thing, but I mean, it's still it's more about team building and having that opportunity to share insights and it just engage. I mean, I know a lot of people, I mean, as we've heard, like loneliness and isolation has been
Yeah.
a problem. I mean, be it professionally or I mean, socially, more importantly, I think. But having the social aspect of a professional work environment, I mean, is shouldn't be underestimated. I think for some folks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like the clear thing to me when I look at like the future and just what it means for workplace, what it means for data and all of that. I feel like people don't want to go to offices because they have to. I think it's going to be a world where we're evolving to a world where let's just take it back from where we're evolving from. It used to be that companies had all the power to say you need to be here and here at this time to be effective. And it was the lack, I think, of understanding that people can be effective in different spaces that allowed for that to kind of happen. The pandemic exposed everyone to the ability to be effective from wherever you are. So now there has to be a different type of energy that pulls people into an office space. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not organizations giving up power or relinquishing power to their employees, but more so it's empowering their employees to really say, where can I do my best work? And wherever that is, that's where I want to be. And kudos to you if you're an organization that has a space where they're like, that is where I do my best work. It's not at home. It's actually in this office because I feel more comfortable. I feel like the office kind of understands me just like my home does. What makes me comfortable about being home? It's because I built this place, right? And I built it for me. And everything that I built in this space, I built it so that I'm comfortable. If you as an organization has the data points to be able to create that type of space for the people that are working for you, then you will, in my opinion, you may not have as much of a struggle with getting people to come into the office. But the future of work to me is really about, it's not about location, it's about the intention behind the spaces that you're building. And I just think that as AV professionals in understanding different metrics and data points that are necessary for organizations to do something as I wouldn't say it's as simple as, but something as simple as right sizing a portfolio, right? To understand the data points that are needed to be pulled from the technology, you almost have to understand a bit of the real estate side of it as well. And so, like, I've decided to get my QPCR, which is a qualified professional corporate real estate certification from Cornet Global, and the whole reason behind that is because it teaches you about portfolio management and a bit of like what is important from a real estate perspective, and then you can tie that into technology and AV, and it makes more sense for the enterprise relationships that are gonna take place because more and more organizations are having multiple spaces. They're building their corporate office, much like you all are building real estate, and then they're building those third space environments as well. And there's mixed use too. Mixed use is becoming a huge thing, right? A huge thing. And so, I think that it's it's important to speak about all of those different components that go into what makes a great space. But I feel like AV today maybe not everyone is there in conversation. And so when you look at like AV today, do you see it more as like, I mean, you've gone to the conferences, you're on the end user side of things, but you're also integrating the technology and you're innovating within your organization with how you all are developing technology. And so are you seeing it as still a infrastructure environment or is it like experience and intelligence? Or do you think that it's like all three? What is your kind of what are you seeing from that?
So I feel that AV, it's some of what when the AV IT convergence conversations were happening 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and jokes of one day we're gonna walk like Google will walk onto the Infocom floor and just buy the whole industry and just it will all be Google and we would joke about it and what have you. But I mean, you are starting to see some of the the outputs, let's call it, of that convergence happening where you've got Teams meeting rooms and you've got Zoom rooms and you've got these Google Meet rooms that are have become commoditized in a way. Like there isn't a lot of design. I mean, you put the bar in, you put the TV up, and I mean, one of the examples of this year at the Infocom show was the fact that one of the innovations was that one of the manufacturer's new box allowed you to configure multiple, like many of their sound bars all at once without having to take things out of the box. And I mean, that's if there's anything more exemplifying of a commodity with regards to AV, I mean that's it. So
Mm.
so at the downstream, let's call it, side of things, or the low end, the economical side of things is become this commoditized sort of element, and which I think is net good because that means companies can can find budget to deploy more spaces and more collaborative rooms, which I think drives that in-office experience again and piece that bringing people into the office, I know for us anyway, it isn't about like I'm not being asked to come in and just do heads down spreadsheets all day. Like where we when we come into the office, it's about being in a team environment, being around folks, having conversations, having brainstorming sessions, white space sessions, whatever you want to call it. But we are there. That's what work is that day, and we prepare for it. So there's no expectation. When no one's. It isn't how it used to be where you had to sort of be there and say hello, put the time. Like it was like taking
Yeah.
attendance in grade school or something. I mean, and you got your performance review was partly based on attendance, which was just a wild concept. Getting back to your question, I mean, and so for the AV space, I mean, there's still those become with any sort of technology as things have evolved and technology cycles, I mean, are still rotating, and I think people again companies coming out of the pandemic are seeing their spaces maybe now a little dated, a little a little behind the times of certain ways. So I think the opportunity for the AV industry, AV integrators to take advantage of still building and custom spaces and integrating the AV systems, control, audio, video. I mean, all of that. So, I mean, the sound reinforcement, what have you, all together is still there. But I still think that there's this next bridge that can be crossed, which is again tying the data that you can get from those systems now, and as well as the rest of the workplace together. And I see gaps in service providers and folks that can really understand and deploy and really help guide end users into understanding what these systems can do, the power in having that data, the power like correlating disparate data sets together in a building to really understand the building holistically. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Having an understanding for corporate real estate space planning as well. I mean, that's a massive thing we do with a lot of our data is really evaluating space and how to utilize space. It isn't about tracking folks. I mean, it isn't about mapping out where Johnny's going from or Jane when they swipe their card. It isn't really about that. I mean, we just see radar based warm bodies on a screen, but we see how
Right.
long they're in a room. We see how many times, I mean, someone's in that room and for how long, how many people are in that room and for how long. And so as we've looked at getting back to the neurodiverse or the accessibility piece, I mean, we have spaces now on our floors called libraries. They're exactly that. They are a quiet space that they're structured or designed like a co-working type of environment. So it's a big room with sort of bench type workstations, no walls like in between the workstations or anything, but there's no phone calls, there's no video calls. It is just a quiet space to go in and work. The lights are a little lower and the acoustics are a little better to help mitigate sound. And people, I mean, they look for those spaces now and we've been able to understand how some of our first libraries that were deployed how they're used, we've been able to scale those in terms of size to fit into more buildings and more spaces now. And I think we're fortunate. I mean, I feel fortunate that I'm able to learn and kind of and drive a lot of this. But I've also come to learn that I mean, there's gaps in terms of the individuals and organizations that are able to help deliver these. I mean, we've
Yeah.
brought along, for example, our AV integrators into the occupancy sensor space and into some of the reservation and room booking space by saying to the vendors who were US vendors and wanted to bring up US teams. And we said, well, no, we want our teams to understand and learn how to do this. And they're not internal teams, they're contractors, they're vendors that we use. But thankfully we form partnerships, strong partnerships with those organizations and they've learned and they've come along and they've seen doors open for them now as well by being able to not only deploy the hardware but understand it and be able to help navigate their other customers through the journey.
I think if with what you said, I think that like if AV fails, collaboration fails, and then everything downstream kind of feels it, right? You mentioned a little bit of that downstream effect. Data sits at the center of that, but one thing that is, I think, more important than anything from what you said is the ability that collaboration doesn't start in the actual office space. Collaboration starts with the different teams that are involved and the ability to open the door for creative partnerships that actually add to your organization that some organizations may think is taking away from their their project, their scope, or their ability to work in margins or whatever it is. It's also familiar to what you said about the compounding effect on LinkedIn. You mentioned, like, you have your skills, like certain skills will compound. You never know when you'll need them, but the opportunity will arise for you to be able to kind of use those skills. And integrators, I think, need to also think of collaboration and partnerships from that same perspective, where it's like, hey, you may not know how to do this today, or you may know how to do it, and you may be able to share that knowledge or that skill set with another integration team and build from that. And you never really know where that new skill, or that new, or even the ability to kind of teach that skill, you never really know, like, where that's going to come to fruition and, like, actually benefit you down the line. But you have to be open to being able to say, all right, I'm going to take this leap, because it's not the short-sighted view of this. It's the long-term relationship-based partnership that I'm seeing out for the future. And so I just think that that's a really kind of fascinating point. And from where you sit, I think that you see the ones who do it well, and you see what comes from that. And then I'm pretty sure you see the ones that maybe struggle with that same thing. But it's important, I feel, for organizations out there to really really think about where collaboration starts. Right, it's not just the tech, but it's your approach to business, to growth. It starts there. So I guess one of the next kind of questions that I have for you is, with all of the data that you're sitting on, would you say that there are certain kind of data points that you pay more attention to when you're, like, designing a space, or for the next design, like, that genuinely kind of change how you design or operate within a space? Are there different kind of signals and data points that you pay attention to that are important for your organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's been evolving. I mean, we started with occupancy. I mean, because every new data point that we've collected, it's been just like finding a treasure chest, right? I mean, in terms of just having access to it, and what can we do with this? And we are now at a point where, I mean, we have multiple years of this data. We can see trends, we can see rise and falls, and we now know, oh, there must have been a, for us, we have what's called the TELUS Days of Giving, generally in May of every year. And so we know in May we're going to see these outliers in terms of attendance at buildings, because teams are coming in to volunteer. That's what TELUS Days of Giving are. It's when we are encouraged as employees of TELUS to go and volunteer our time, be it individually, or more importantly as a team. And so across the country, you'll see in May these surges in attendance at buildings, because all these teams are kind of coming in and engaging and being a part of this community service event that we've had for many many years. So having access to that was great. And then how do we leverage that and utilize it to, again, just make every next renovation, every next build something better, something more positive and more optimized for the team that's in that area, or the users that we've sort of identified that will be in that building or that space. But then as we've added environmental sensors to that mix, we now understand and layer. I mean, we haven't layered yet. That's the big thing. Our next thing, especially heading into next year, a big goal for me is tying these disparate data sets together, but being able to very manually tie this data together to see, well, when a room is 80% used for 2 hours, how does the CO2 like rise and fall, or how does the acoustics in adjacent spaces, how are they affected? And so we've had some very surprising data as we've deployed environmental sensors into some of these spaces, tying into the occupancy as well. And then for us, another big thing has just been being able to scale across different sensor providers and different vendors. I mean, a big
Sure.
part of our role is also an R&D, or a more of an academic type of program that looks at as much technology as we can. As we can get our hands on. We run POCs constantly. The office I'm sitting in right now, we're running a very interesting POC with a sensor provider that their sensors are basically 1 square inch in size, and about a quarter of an inch thick, and battery powered. And They're extremely economical. The data resolution isn't necessarily what we would get from some of our more sophisticated system, but I'm able to deploy it into lower tier buildings and scale our budget across for sensor deployment across more buildings, collect more data, and really start to then like tie that data together to rationalize it and normalize it so that we can see that a desk in a, like, let's call it a tier B building, how that's used versus a tier A building, and so on. So, I mean, having the access to the data and really being able to collect as much of it as we can, but finding the balance to not sort of be a data hoarder. Like, I'm not looking to
Right.
pile up like newspapers from 20 years ago kind of approach to data. It's really about being useful with it and meaningful, um and 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 if we don't need it, then we won't keep it, or we'll consider whatever use we need for it.
Yeah, it's like the building is always talking to you, right? But
Mhm.
most organizations are just choosing not to listen.
Or, I mean, the
Yeah,
building has the potential to talk, and that's, I
for
think, part
potential,
of it
right,
as
right.
well. And
Yeah,
and that's another thing that we've been working on is not only tying in sort of the occupancy and environmental, but tying that to the building in terms of how does the building respond to that. I mean, I
yeah,
know you had shared an article with me, and I had heard it before about like sentient buildings and the human
yeah,
building interaction, and these types of concepts. I mean, it's the direction things are heading inevitably, and it's meaningful. It's meaningful from an environmental perspective. It's meaningful from a workplace performance perspective and a workplace well-being perspective. But having buildings that can be, I don't want to say alive, because in the age of AI, that sounds like kind of creepy for people. But having
right, yeah,
buildings that are dynamic in their abilities to respond to their users, and so that can be as simple as if a meeting room is kind of busier than it would typically be, and that's caused CO2 levels to go up more than they need to be. Well, let's open a damper, or let's get fresh air in there, or let's put a sign up on the TV to say, "Hey, why don't you, I mean, go for a walk?" Or like, it's time for a, like, in the same way, like my watch tells me to stand every
yeah,
hour and make sure, have the room say, "Hey, you know what? Why doesn't everybody stand for a minute, or go get some water, or what have you?" Just to get air flowing, but also to get people moving, and tying all of this in, but doing it in a way that isn't Big Brother, is something that people can see as a benefit and not as remove the ick factor, I guess, from it all.
yeah, yeah. I think that there is always that big brother feeling that I think really pushes a lot of people away from experimenting with these different technologies. And you mentioned like R&D and how you all have a bit of an academic feel to your organization. And I think when you're in that R&D or that academic arena, and just from being someone who is constantly like the academic world is a world that I'm fascinated with in general, not just because we work in higher education, but you deal with or balance like two forces that don't always play nicely, right? There's the standardization and then there's experimentation. And so where do you all kind of draw the line, right? When it comes to like, hey, this is where we want to be, where we want things to be a little bit more predictable, and this is where we're kind of willing to push those boundaries.
So, going back to TELUS being entrepreneurial and startup by sort of culture, it does give me an advantage to be able to go out and fail fast, but be able to take some risks, and to afford myself the ability to explore and research and develop use cases and business cases, and be able to present those. Again, I think the other advantage that I have is the fact that I have leadership and colleagues that also are intrigued by this, also understand the power and the potential that we have with regards to how our buildings operate, how our buildings function, and more importantly, how we can deliver an exceptional experience for our team members. And so I think never losing sight of that helps to foundationally be a jumping off point
Sure.
to then look at some of these things. I mean, we one of our corporate values is that we embrace change, and it's something that is a genuine and meaningful thing that we all sort of live as part of TELUS. And so in doing that, I mean, there's an understanding that we can only change if we explore how those changes can happen. And so being given that opportunity, again, I'm at a bit of an advantage because I drive both the standardization side and the research and
Excellent.
development side. So
Yeah.
um, I can find that balance within our team, and so it works. Um, I also would love to give a plug to the Avixa Standards Steering Committee, which I've also been a part of. I've been a
Right.
standards development volunteer for since about 2012, 2013, and so
Wow. Okay.
understanding, I think, how standards are developed and what goes into it has really helped me to then take that R&D side of things and start from the as early as I possibly can to really understand how does this become an in production or more importantly a standardized part of our deployment that is meaningful and can drive the change that we want.
So have a Vixa reach out to me
Okay.
because I'm convinced now that I need to be a part of this this committee, especially if you're on it and you sound like you're enjoying it. So
Oh,
sign me
it's
up.
fantastic. Yeah, it's a lot of
Sign me
fun.
up.
It's a lot. I
Yeah.
encourage anyone to volunteer with any part of Avixa, but yeah, I'm biased to standards. That's been
Yeah.
my fave.
I mean, I love Avixa. I've done quite a bit with them, not only from speaking engagements, but also, obviously having my CTS and other things. But I'm a big fan of Avixa and what they've done, not only for the industry and standardization, but for what they will continue to do, not just here in the U.S., but their expansion to the Caribbean and beyond. And so I'm looking forward to actually working with Avixa on some Caribbean efforts. Obviously, being from Guyana, there's a lot of Guyanese folks in your neck of the woods as
Absolutely,
well.
absolutely.
So yeah, but that so my I'm totally a fan of Avixa in that light, but I would really appreciate that kind of that comment from you. And so I guess the last question that I have for you before we wrap things up would be from your insight, like what's one thing you can say if you were looking at, tell of the future, if you all get it right, like what does it feel like for an employee to walk into a TELUS building in the future? If you all get it right, not just from the entryway, not just coming in, but also just like the experience kind of all around.
I think for us, I mean, for me anyway, I really want to have a workplace that again people want to be in that they can trust is going to be optimized for their ability to deliver their best as well,
Right.
in whatever that is for that individual or for that team, and know that there's a team behind the scenes that is working to make their in office experience the best it can be. And I really do think that the more that systems can be tied together, and this is one point I maybe didn't mention earlier, but it's where I feel like AV integrators have this leg up is the fact that for decades, AV integrators have been tying together these disparate systems with regards to audio and video and control. And I know now, I mean, a lot of vendors sort of do it all. And so you can go to a single vendor solution and deploy that. But I mean, I very much remember the days of it's a Crestron controller and it's an Extron switcher and it's a video switcher, excuse me, and a biamp DSP and tying all that together and making sure it worked every single time someone pushed that button. And so, but back to your question though, I mean, for us, the workplace, I feel is a connected place, is a place that's dynamic and understanding what its users are doing and what more importantly what its users need to again in order to fulfill their goals and be
Sure.
able to be optimized to deliver on their performance. And then on the living side, and the residential side for us, it's really again just making spaces as enjoyable and as comfortable and as connected as individuals would come to expect. I think as we continue to move forward, I think any resistance to smart technology is something that will just work itself through the system as people just
Sure.
get more used to being connected in the same way like I remember the internet my first internet experience was in
Yeah.
my high school library, but now I mean you see 3-year-olds on an iPad and they can navigate an iPad better than I can sometimes it seems in order to get to a game or a video or what have you. So I mean
Yeah.
technology is there, it's always moving forward, it's not going to go away, and so how we can best utilize that in both our personal lives and in our professional lives is something that I'm focused on. And I work every day to deliver exceptionally for our team.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I agree with you. The world of the future is a connected world. I think that we oftentimes look at things from our own perspective, and especially if you're maybe in the older generation and we can't see how that would happen. You think to yourself, like, I would never want this to happen. But what we don't see is the younger generation being desensitized to a lot of this connection and a lot of these, ways that technology is already intruding and impeding on our lives from our perspective, but it's very natural and normal for them. So as we develop as organizations, we do a great job of getting the technology of the future right. But we oftentimes move a whole lot slower when it comes to the experience side of the future, right? So getting that right, I think, is where organizations can change and evolve. And I think that the more and more we see that, the more beautiful the world becomes. In a sense, maybe a healthier environment as well, right?
No, I was just saying it's true, and I think finding the balance and I because I know for us, and I really didn't touch on it, but privacy is of the utmost importance, and so that is, I mean, always at the fore of everything that we do. We've got a very robust and in-depth, like, privacy assessment program that we have to go through with everything that we do. This becomes part of that R&D side of things, and communicating that, I think also becomes part of it. Like, in the absence of knowledge is where some of the creep factor comes from, some of the misunderstanding of what an organization is doing with data and how users are I mean, how workers are working or what have you. And so, I mean, for us, it's ensuring, I mean, that the balance is found. And then again, really about communicating about what we're doing to and how it improves the workplace.
Yeah, yeah, man. I'm right there with you. Privacy is a big thing. As we talk about privacy, we can obviously go into a whole nother conversation about cybersecurity and all these other things that have to happen around that. But I gotta save some of that for our next conversation because I know we're gonna talk again in
Fantastic.
the future. I know that there's so much that we can discuss around this, right? Like it's one of those never ending topics. I could talk all day about it. I'm sure you can as well.
Oh, absolutely.
But I just want to thank you not just for your insight, but for the intention that you have behind the work that you're doing. It's really special, and it shows up not just in this conversation, but in the spaces that you're designing and the spaces that you're building. And this conversation is really why Build Together exists, right? It's for everyone who's listening, who gets to think differently about the workspace from this episode or think differently about buildings from this episode. It's really special and to think about you and your role and how your role is shaping a lot of this, right? For other organizations to kind of think about that too. And so it's been a pleasure to share a conversation with someone who's not just thinking about the technology, but thinking about how people experience the future, how people will experience buildings, and someone who's building the future right alongside a lot of other folks in the industry. And so I really appreciate you for taking your time and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute blast, and yeah, I mean, I could talk all day on this. So yeah, we'll definitely have to continue this in the future at some point. But thank you again so much. I really appreciate what you're doing with this podcast. I appreciate being on it, and yeah, I wish you just continued success.
Yeah, man. Thank you. And my hope is that we'll come back around and have another conversation and really be able to kind of touch on how things have changed, right? So thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. This was Built Together with none other than Jason Antinori. Appreciate you all, and give us some comments on this. Let us know what you think. And Jason, if anyone wanted to find you or get in touch with you, if you want to hear from people, right? Where could they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best place is on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there, sharing some thoughts and ideas. And so yeah, just search for Jason Antinori on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you know where to find me. You can find Jason on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time on Built Together.